you for joining us for week 5 of Doc Talk. Again, conspicuous by her absence, Dr. Regina Parnell, having some family stuff going on. We hope to see her back sooner than later. In the meantime, we send her our best, and hopefully she's back with us shortly. Today we have with us Major Dr. Michell Greenidge coming to you from Tampa, Florida. We have Dr. Jason Lester coming to you from Aurora, Colorado, and Dr. Crystal DeBerry coming to you from Memphis, Tennessee. I'm Dr. Jamaal Fortner of Houston, Texas. Today we're going to be talking about the preschool to prison pipeline. Are we kind of putting our sons and daughters in danger just by sending them to school? All right, so we'll start off just kind of talking about what is the preschool to prison pipeline. Does anybody want to kick off? Y'all want me to do it? I'll do it. All right.
Don't start that off, Dr.
I got you. So, for those who aren't really familiar, the preschool to prison pipeline refers to the fact that African American children, boys and girls, specifically boys, are kicked out of school and given out of school discipline far more at a rate of usually like about 3 to 5 times more than their white counterparts. This also applies to Hispanic students. This also applies to Native American students, especially. Where in, I believe it was Minnesota, they were getting expelled up to 8 times more than their white counterparts. So this is definitely an issue that's affecting all children of color, and it's something that we definitely want to talk about today. So, with that being the case, let me ask, what do y'all think are some things that may feed into this new phenomena as it's occurring?
I guess what I want to say is that having a 7-year-old now, and remembering when he was in preschool, I'm grateful that the people there had implicit bias training. I'm grateful that they recognized that there were not the issues that were happening were not behavioral issues, but essentially they had the dexterity, they had enough dexterity within their craft to know that we need to have some evaluations happen, and we need to have some interventions. So if individuals have not had the training, and it's already difficult to get people to be preschool teachers or to work in that setting in the very beginning, if folks don't have the training that they need to do their job, unfortunately, some decisions will happen, and the overrepresentation of Black and brown children will continue to transpire because they're getting suspended. So then, when these kids get suspended or expelled from preschool, that might play a little bit into, wow, maybe I'm not good enough, or there's something wrong with me, or a little imposter syndrome. And, then it plays into, wow, you're not doing as good of enough job as you could do with regard to scholastic achievement. So, what I'm talking about is the beginning.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, were you going to say?
I knew somebody was about to say something. I just didn't know who. Go ahead.
I absolutely, Dr. Lester. I agree with you. I think it starts from childhood. And I mean, where are we at most of the day when we're kids? We're at school, right? Learning how to live in this world, how to make friends, how to study, how to read, all these different things. But, sometimes we're going to have challenges. And what I see with from preschool to prison pipeline is starting off with that negative association between school learning, being a good part of society, to dropout, right? To being in prison, leading to prison, because now I'm looking at myself as a failure because the system failed me, right? As a child, how am I supposed to know how to quote unquote behave when I'm 7 years old? I'm still trying to learn, what's normal behavior versus not normal behavior when it comes to children, right? That's what we have to be thinking about. I often talk with my colleagues about the fact that a lot of times what you'll see is the especially young Black boys getting diagnosed with ADHD right off the bat, right? That's the first thing that comes along. But what did you do leading up to this? Is it really ADHD? I remember my son was diagnosed with ADHD, and for a short period of time, by the time he was in high school, all of a sudden he didn't have no ADHD anymore, right? And I know that they say that they can grow out of it, but in all actuality, that's not the case. If you have ADHD, you're going to have it forever. It's all about how you manage it, right? But if you're already being labeled as a person with ADHD from childhood, and that's all we can say, give this child a pill and see how it goes, we're already uncomfortable with that, right? And so how are we getting these kids to the places that they need to be while at the same time addressing their behavior, you know what I mean, in the right way?
I definitely agree with that.
My perspective is challenges versus what's prison worthy. I know we're talking about preschool, but I study the aspect of third grade test scores equal the number of prisons that should be built. That's an issue. Third grade. That blows my mind that in third grade, they're looking at assessment scores. If we know anything about, the educational system, and this is not to down it whatsoever, but it's almost a one-size-fits-all approach. And we know that it's not suitable for everyone. It's evidenced by those who struggle, but then maybe when they go to college or they go to a different school, we're fine, right? It's almost like telling a goldfish to climb a tree, but then when you put it in water, okay, now it's flourishing and it's thriving.
Yeah.
In the third grade, that's preschool, kindergarten, first and second grade. Are we even taking into consideration what that education looked like before the third grade? And again, how involved were the teachers, were the parents, were, just the other family members, surrounding this child? Again, challenges versus what's really truly prison worthy. And do we really know in the third grade? Behavior is taught.
Yes.
And learned.
Yes.
So in the third grade, if we're talking about just behaviors alone, okay, we know that they learned it from somewhere. Why are we not retraining them?
Yeah.
When it comes to the assessment scores, if we're noticing that there's a specific population, a specific race, a specific ethnicity, whatever, is struggling a little bit more than the others, why is that not a time to intervene instead of, all right, we're the construction workers. Let's get these sales ready.
Right.
And that's terrible for so many different reasons. I mean, right now, we're seeing about 250 preschoolers. Now, this is back when we were in school. Okay, so let me also put that caveat, because if your mom is expelling you from homeschool, that's rough. But back when we were in school, you had about 250 preschoolers being expelled or suspended daily. And overall, in the U.S., you have 40% of all students who are expelled being Black. Now, I want to point out why that number is particularly significant. The total population of Black students in education is like half that. So you might be looking at 20% overall population Black students, but they're making up almost half of the total expulsions. So when you're looking at such a large disparity and a large gap, I think y'all are already kind of hinting at what's going on. One, they're not really particularly keen on trying to fix the behavior because they know that's going to be profitable for them down the line when we're talking about prisons. We're looking at a lack of training. Dr. Lester mentioned, hey, if they didn't have this implicit bias training, because teachers need to understand what their biases are because they come in with them just like everybody else, and I think another big thing is no one pays attention to all the surrounding issues, as y'all pointed out. Yes. No one pays attention to the surrounding issue because even I had to catch myself doing this because the first thought that people tend to have is, oh, well, this kid is just whatever, so like the ADHD thing. So you get a kid and they're just really hyper and they raise their hand every 5 seconds. The teacher don't notice, they blurt it out, that kind of thing. Well, what the teacher's not taking into consideration is, well, if, little Tyrone is one child of 12 in his house, and he has a single mother, he knows that he has to speak up and talk loudly and quickly or else he's going to be overlooked.
Correct.
But the teacher doesn't understand that. And because she doesn't understand that, she's just seeing this as, oh, well, he's being insolent, he's being disruptive. No, he's trying to participate, but you're not allowing him to in a way that is, comfortable for him or in a way that he is accustomed to doing so.
Mm-hmm.
It's so funny, Dr. Greenidge, that you mentioned your son having ADHD and then saying, well, he grew out of it. I've had it my whole life. I had it when I didn't even know what it was. By the time I found out what it was, I was in college and I was like, oh, well, I guess I better just figure it out now. Right. But the crazy part about that is in working substance use treatment, what I found was almost everyone who came in who said they had a heroin addiction, who were younger people, almost all of them told me that they were diagnosed with ADHD. They had been given something that had a stimulant in it. Mm-hmm. And then when the doctor would no longer prescribe them the stimulant-based ADHD med, they transitioned right onto heroin. So when we're talking about preschool to prison pipeline, it tends to focus on the expulsions and the suspensions. But what it doesn't often focus on is how kids are being forced to assimilate in a way that's later going to lead them to deleterious outcomes. Yeah. You're forcing my child to be drugged up so that they can sit here like a potato just to get through the school day and not bother anybody. Yeah. But when they hit 18 and they can no longer get these drugs that y'all are happy to give them, mm-hmm. Now they're going to go on street drugs and then you're going to want to throw them in jail. Yeah.
I just can't help but think about, what is the perception of these people that are working with the preschoolers? Because, imagine if there was a sibling group and, maybe that first kid went and perhaps he has some maladaptive behavior. And then, they're like, well, oh man, here comes Jason's brother. He's coming next year, and I get the feeling that sometimes, and not just in preschool teachers, but many of us in the helping field, we probably need to develop a concept of having this idea of a fresh start, where, yesterday's scores don't win today's games. Yeah. So let's just, try to take it day by day and, let's not gaslight these children and let's not, create a perception of a family that, or a child that, we haven't really had the opportunity of working with. Because some of these kids, they walk into the classroom or they walk into, middle school and high school already with 3 strikes against them. And just as soon as they go into that principal's office, they are, getting harsh zero tolerance situations. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, on the other side of the train tracks in a more privileged area, is viewed as, oh, yeah, that's just what boys do, or, oh, that's just, that's just normal teenage behavior. So, the inequities that exist, they're huge. And, I just wonder now, how many of these kids, like, if Black and brown children are 3.7% more likely to be suspended or expelled out of preschool and then go down this road, on the other side of the train tracks, what does it look like?
Yeah. I think it's so interesting when we look at education and, it's like you don't want to down our education system by any means, but in so many ways, when it comes down to Black and brown children and other children of color, indigenous populations, they are failed over and over and over again because you have teachers who don't look like them, you have teachers who don't understand them, and moreover, you have teachers who don't bother to try to understand them. Mm-hmm. And so, even with programs like Teach for America, it's a great idea in theory because it's encouraging potential awesome educators to come to areas that are low income. Mm-hmm. And that's awesome. But what happens when I take, a single child out of Minnesota, she's from, Duluth or one of the nice little areas in Minnesota. And now we bring her down to, Houston's 3rd Ward, where almost 100% of the student body is African American.
Yeah.
They're low income.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't understand this culture. She doesn't understand the speech. So what happens when she gets into the classroom? Because now everything that these students do is going to be seen as, oh, it's aggressive.
Yeah.
Oh, they're loud. Oh, they're disruptive. Now, if you had a teacher who was from that area, they'll probably look at them like, go sit down before I call your mama type situation and you move on. You know? But this teacher's going to always go to critical mass because she's not clear on it. She doesn't understand it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you know what, Dr. Jamaal, so just to kind of go back on ADHD, I'm not, and I'm going to just go ahead and say, we're not saying that ADHD is not a thing. It's just shouldn't be the first thing, right? And so, and we want a proper diagnosis, not just something to just write off, right? Because automatically from jump, we're not giving our kids a chance because we can't figure it out. So I think Dr. Lester brought up a good point with implicit bias, because when you do have those teachers that come, regardless of where they're from, but if they're not familiar with the area or the environment, it's going to be some challenges. Number one, expect that, right? Number two, expect that you're going to have to educate yourself on how to teach these children, how to actually you as a teacher to fit in, right? And get them to hear you and understand, and you get comfortable with that. And what that means is you can't just go to school and get the bachelor's degree or the master's degree in teaching and expect it's all supposed to just work out. I think that a teacher is a great professional, right? I think we need them. We need passionate teachers that know, and that's one of the reasons why I think they should get paid more, but that's a whole nother story. But but I think it is very, very, very important to handle some of these issues that we're talking about in the first place, to combat some of that preschool to prison pipeline.
I want to piggyback off Major Dr. Greenidge in regards to making sure that they are receiving the proper diagnoses. Mm-hmm. If you are diagnosed with ADHD, technically you're supposed to have a brain scan. That is something to do with dopamine. I think it's a lack of dopamine in the prefrontal cortex. Yeah. It's actually a brain thing. Mm-hmm. And it's not a matter of they can't pay attention. No, they pay attention to everything. So guess what? If you're a teacher and you don't have control of your classroom, that's breeding grounds for someone with those symptoms who's paying attention to everything. Now they can't function because you know what? They're listening to this person over here who's having these sidebar conversations. They're looking at or paying attention to the classmate over here who's completely off task. And now I'm off task because now I am highly stimulated by my environment. Is your classroom full of red, oranges, and just those bright colors that trigger those with this diagnosis?
Mm-hmm. I have seen. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. It's interesting that when we're talking about this topic, ADHD comes up. Mm-hmm. And it's because a lot of Black boys are diagnosed with this, and they are not taking into consideration the environment. Having a teacher who cares, having a teacher that is educated to know. Dr. Lester, even when you talked about what's on the other side of the train tracks, I have been on both sides. In Memphis at one point, there was a very clear division between city school and county school. And city school did not have the best reputation. People tried to argue that, oh, it's not a difference. Yes, it was. I went to a third grade county classroom setting. They were already writing in cursive, already doing multiplication and division. I left the city school only knowing single digit addition and subtraction, and we were still writing in manuscript. Wow. My teacher, when my mom told her that we were transferring to the county school, I remember it was the last day of class, and she looked at me and she said, I want you to take all these books, and she said, and I want you to read them the whole summer. She's like, you promise me? And I was like, yes. Even then, being in the second grade, I was thinking, why was she really truly acting like this? And she was a white lady. Mm-hmm. She couldn't tell me that I was about to face hell. Mm. She couldn't tell me that when I went to that school, they were going to tell me I needed resource. But in my city school, I was excelling. So when we're talking about that train track, oh my gosh, it is most definitely a difference. Teachers definitely matter. And can we point blame? I really can't say like where's the point blame, because a lot of it is systematic too.
Yeah.
If my teachers knew when she gave me that stack of books and said, promise me you'll read these, she already knew what I was about to encounter. So someone could easily question and say, well, why didn't she prepare you the whole school year? But when you're looking at the top of the education system, when you're looking at the other systematic issues, people can only do so much. And she was an awesome teacher. Mm-hmm. Awesome. But who can we really blame? Again, they're taking third grade assessment scores and saying, hey, this is how we determine what prisons to build. I'm saying it throughout this whole recording because that just, it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. I concur. Dr. Lester, what's going on? I know your brain burning.
Man, Dr. DeBerry, she done woke it up in me because, I mean, I guess what I want to say is that this, yes, this is a scholastic thing and there are many articles and journals on it, but, it's one thing to read it. It's a whole nother ball game when you see it yourself. And now having just heard what Dr. DeBerry said, I could not help but think about when I was a caseworker, I remember going to a school and totally advocating for this young Black boy. At the time, the diagnosis was off. He couldn't read. He was having some home situations. Mm-hmm. And I guess it broke my heart now because this same young man is now in jail for the rest of his life. Mm-hmm. And, as a practitioner, you look in the mirror and you wonder, well, is there anything that I could have done differently that probably would have, stopped this? And that's a heavy burden to wear. Yeah. And then Dr. DeBerry brought up the fact about the system. And I went to a rally a few weeks ago, and I heard this brother, he was yelling on a megaphone, the system's not broken, it was built this way. And it's just like, wow. And then I think of my mom, who was the valedictorian of Hamilton High School in 1968 or 69. And I remember hearing her say, well, we got our books from the white schools that were 10 years old.
Yes.
And so we would have an education that was 10 years behind. So if you were to look at that and have it transcend into now to today's times, when we talk about the concept of the railroad track, it's real. I mean, on this side, the property tax, they pay for, all kind of nice glitz and glamours in this school. But then on this side of the train tracks, the property tax, you're only getting bare minimums. And then these kids, they grow up just miles away from one another, and they have such different outcomes. It is fascinating to see this, and what I want to say is that it's very real.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about some of the causation. We talked about what it is. I mean, what can we do? What would you encourage family and parents and friends? What can they do to intercede on behalf of their kids and hopefully make their situations better? What are the solutions when we're talking about this type of systemic, ongoing situation? Because I mean, let's face it, this would have been started back in about 1964. So, with the Civil Rights Act passing, and schools had to be integrated, immediately my mind goes to, okay, well, hey, everybody had to get the same education, but still not quite, because no, it just said that everybody had to be able to go to the public schools in the area. But if your area is predominantly Black, with, as you pointed, low property taxes, so there's less money going into the school system to start with, it's not private, then is my child really getting an equal education to that person who can afford to send their child to the $20,000 a year private, prep school?
Yeah. And you know what, Dr. Jamaal, I hear exactly what you're saying. I think it's a tough question to answer because of how the funding works. The system is not designed to put that money into the schools in the lower socioeconomic areas, right? And so because of that, this is gonna be a cycle that keeps going. And I remember for me, as I talked about before, I was bused to schools, right? That gave me a better opportunity. And I remember my last year of high school, all of my friends left, and my boyfriend, my high school boyfriend, and I just couldn't take it. Okay, so I decided, I need to go to one of my local high schools. And I felt like I've always been in magnet programs and things of that nature. So I'll just get into the magnet program here. Now in South Central, most people have heard of Crenshaw High School. Now that's a great school in the inner city, great school. But I didn't want to go there because all my family was there. I wanted to be different. So I went to our rival, Dorsey. Okay. Big mistake. And now, no shade, Dorsey. You know, I love y'all, alma mater and all that. But my education was dramatically different than when I was at Granada Hills in the Valley. It was dramatically different. And I mean, I didn't even go to school all day because all of the requirements I had already met. So I was going to school half a day. And I remember thinking, man, I learned some of this stuff way back, like in the 8th grade. You know what I mean? And so I was quite disappointed. I've always thought about how can we make that change? Number one, we've got to get those programs like Crenshaw has and resituate these monies to go into these schools so that number one, we don't get the 10-year-old books, right? We get the books that everybody else get. I think it should be like across the board, we're all getting the same money. We're all getting the same types of teachers. We're all getting the same types of education. And that's not just your top college degree, but things like the implicit bias. We're all getting that as teachers and going into these schools and teaching America the way that we should be teaching across the board. And that's all areas of our history, not just one area. We need to teach more about Black history. We need to teach more about Native American history and things of that nature. So there's so many different components, and my mind is just running wild on how do we fix this problem? It's going to be a whole effort from everybody.
Good point. When you say everybody, I know we're talking about the school, parents.
Yep.
Some of these teachers, we could talk about cultural competency and implicit bias training, but we have to also remember that sometimes this poverty mindset is very challenging for some, even for us, and we're from these communities.
Yes, ma'am.
So we have to, if we're talking about changing schools, changing the type of education we provide to their children, if the parents are not ready to receive that type of change, what are we doing besides taking nice, clean water when they come to our schools, but then put them back into mud at home? We gotta figure out what this water flow looks like when we're talking about outside of the school system. When here in school, this young man is being told you can do it, you can do it, you can make it. We see you, but mom, dad, cousin, uncle, brother, and everyone else is like, well, man, I ain't nothing. You ain't gonna be nothing.
Yeah.
We have to make sure that everyone involved, there's going to be some type of equilibrium, homeostasis, what's all the big words we can say to just talk about maintaining balance, right? Not every community will be ready for that.
Well, and
we even want that.
I mean, that's very true. And that's one of the reasons why I love working with children, but that's the challenge in itself is when I worked for a nonprofit and I work for children, let me tell you something, I want to adopt every single one of those kids because it's exactly what you were talking about, putting them back home where they're going to just mess up everything we just taught them.
Exactly.
But on the flip side, so that's the thing, because children don't have a voice. Right? So we have to be their voices. The social workers, the psychologists, the mental health counselors, the teachers, all of us have to be their voices because we can't control what's going on at home. That's the point that I got to. That's the point where I realized that I think we can build a system to give them that opportunity, but there's only so far we go with adults, right? So let's keep doing that. But at the same time, realistically, how much change there are we going to make? You know, so I definitely agree with you, Dr. DeBerry, but at the same time, though, I feel like that's even harder. You know, I think we have more control over giving the kids the best opportunity, because we're going to have them more days than their parents are going to have them, right? And I think that in itself gives them something to look forward to, them something that, you know, I'm going to eat today, right? I'm going to make some new friends. I might even get me some new pants and shoes and shirts and all kind of stuff, because we got all these different programs out here. But unfortunately, I think that's just a tough question.
Yeah. I think we just have to involve the parents. So I'm developing a workshop, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say the title of it on here, because I don't want to turn anyone off, because it does include the N-word. But the thing is how to provide therapy to those with the N-word mentality.
Got you.
I got you. Dr. Lester, we're gonna let you.
And that doesn't mean just Black folks. We all have had clients with that mentality of, oh my gosh, their poverty mindset is awful. So, all right, Dr. Lester.
Is a few things that, you know, everybody is 100% correct. This is not going to be just a one movement kind of fix. This is going to take a lot of work from a micro, meso, and macro perspective.
Yes.
And I guess, you know, we cannot sit here and act like we don't know the zip codes that are perceived to have the issues. And if we were to engage in something like, let's just say geomapping, if we were to look at the data and see if an individual is from this particular zip code, they have this likelihood of ending up in prison.
Yeah.
So if we know the information, what we have to do is put the interventions there before that kid hits preschool. If we know that there's a high likelihood that this individual is totally going to go to prison, why not go earlier and try to get the mentorships, the civic organizations, the mental health components, and the school supports, and everybody, all hands on deck. Earlier, we were talking about the table, and if you're not on the table, you're on the menu. And so many of our kids are on the menu. And, you know, earlier I was talking about the fresh start thing. And I had to look in the mirror after I said it, because as a social worker in the past, I'd be like, oh, you're going to be just like your brother. Oh, you're going to be just like your sister. And I think I was foolish enough to say that at one time. Yeah. And I guess instead of, it takes one to look in the mirror. And the last thing I want to say is, well, two more things. We have to pay these teachers. These teachers should not have to be working 2 and 3 jobs to try and make ends meet. And then they have to, you know, they're playing whack-a-mole. They have to go here and be here. They got to go here and be here. They got to go here and be here. And really, they don't have the opportunity to take an implicit bias training or just focus on their lesson plans and focus on how they can support little Johnny. So, you know, we have to make sure that these folks are compensated correctly. And then we talked about the train tracks. Now, we probably need to do a show about the train tracks.
The train tracks.
But
come on, executive producer.
I'm saying, anyway, what I'm saying though is that we have inequitable discipline practices, and you know, basically, you know, some type of situation needs to happen where at least we have a tiered approach to, you know, what happens on this side of train tracks shouldn't be laughed off and boys just being boys, but then on this side of the train tracks, the police are called and this young man's taken to the D home.
Yes.
So, you know, let's not criminalize mental health, and let's get the mental health, and we have to, let me be quiet for a second. I need to stop, but I can't. We have to make sure that we allow brain health to be normal in the Black and brown communities.
Yes.
Because if we do not sit here and give people an opportunity to take advantage of the services that they are, or they have this false perception that I'm being weak or I'm crazy, then we are doing ourselves a disservice, and we're doing the clients a disservice. I yield my time.
Or man, he said, I yield my time. We like the floor recognizes, the gentleman yields. No, but I mean, I agree with all of you. I think it's such a huge thing, and it has to be done in a way that will bring everybody to the table, in the sense of it's not just the teacher's job, it's not just the school administrator's job, it's not just the parent's job. This is one of those things that's going all the way up to the federal government. And unfortunately, there were some things put in during the last administration that would work to equalize disparities in school discipline, but our current administration, I'm not even going to talk about our current administration. Let's just move away from that. And that's what happens when, again, never mind.
Moving away, executive producer.
Let's move away from that. Anyway, when we're talking about what needs to be done, we have to do our part, and that's a big part of it. We have to step in and do our part. Parents, the school cannot be fully responsible for your child at any point in the day. I'm sorry. Yes, your child goes there from 7 to 3, but they are still your child from 7 to 3. So when the teacher calls you at midday to tell you that little Johnny is cutting cartwheels off the desk, please answer the phone. Please be responsive. Get down to the school and do what you need to do as a parent. And teachers, I don't want y'all to get yourselves so stressed out that, one child talk out of turn and you ready to flip their desk over and throw them smooth out the window. I understand teaching is a stressful job, and I agree with everybody else. Teachers should be paid more. There's no doubt about that. Teachers need to be paid more because there are very few professions where you walk in to do one job, but it's understood that you're going to do 6 more.
Yes.
So, I'm all for teachers being paid more, but if it is too much for you, and if it is just not your passion anymore, move on. I always say, I'm lucky. Again, I grew up in a very small town, so most of my teachers knew my parents. And vice versa. We all went to the same church, or, in many cases, they went to school with people who are the teachers now. I remember my principal grew up with my mom's family. Like, they were all like brothers and sisters. So I didn't have a fighting chance.
Not at all.
I step out of line, they know who to call. They got multiple numbers of who to call.
They're calling.
Really, and they were going to call too. But, I realize now I was lucky in that respect because, they're looking out for you even when you don't realize it.
Yes.
But in the cases that we're in right now, as we talked about with teachers being shipped from across the country, they don't have that relationship. So parents, get a relationship with your child's teacher. Get out there and meet them on open house because that's the start of it. There has to be a relationship. I'm not going to be inclined to, suspend or expel this child when I know what's going on, when the parent has filled me in. Make sure that your child is not just another name in the grade book for them. And that's your part. That's your part. Like I said, teachers got to do their part. And I feel like we as a whole, as society, needs to look at this and say, this ain't right. We don't need to be doing things to take money away from these schools that are failing. We need to figure out how to put money into this school to get it to a point where it's acceptable. Because ultimately, this community still needs a school. And these
Yes.
Yeah, man. I think we ran over a little bit, but yeah. Again, we're missing Dr. Parnell, but hopefully she's back with us in a week or two. God bless her. God keep her. Y'all, thank y'all for being with us. Don't miss week 6. In week 6, we're going to be talking about, y'all, we coming up on a 2-part relationship thing. And so next week in week 6, we're going to be talking about, is your relationship headed for the funeral home? Is it on life support and heading for the funeral home? So y'all don't want to miss that one. Okay? Make sure you stay with us. Thank you so much. Our hope is that you be well. See y'all next week.